Welcome to Capes, Cows and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. And welcome to our weekly review show of the latest entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, WandaVision. Today we'll be looking at the fourth episode of the show, titled We Interrupt This Program, directed by series director Matt Shakman and written by Bobak S. Farjani and Megan McDowell. I'm your host, Jay Carr. I'm a podcaster, writer for Fresh Take Hub, and sound designer. And as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-host,
David Oscar.
And joining us for these weekly reviews, as you've heard for the last couple, we have a very special guest, Tom Gapper.
Hello there, yes, your show's resident. What did we land on last week? Comic Book Samurai, Comic Book Shogun.
Yes.
Something like that.
Shogun. I like the Comic Book Shogun one.
Yeah, that makes
one.
more sense. Okay, Comic Book Shogun it is. We've landed on it, guys. We finally did it.
It's only taken us 4 episodes to get some answers. What's going on here?
Oh my god.
Right, so let's get into this. Originally, it was just meant to be myself and Tom doing this, but after watching the fourth episode, I had to immediately text Dave and be like, you're coming on the show, Dave, because there's just too much to talk about without you here. So, let's get into sort of our overall thoughts before we get into the details and stuff like that. Tom, what did you think about this episode as it was such a different formula to what we're used to in the first 3?
I loved it. It did prove me wrong, the episode, because in the last podcast, me and David kind of had different views of how the sword storyline was going to go, and I was there going, oh no, I think they'll only appear at the end of the episode. Then they were the whole episode, so I was completely wrong there. But I was glad to be wrong, because it was good to see. I loved at the start where we got to see sort of like the actual aftermath of the blip. Got a bit of backstory on Monica, got to see Sword in kind of all its glory. Darcy was there. I mean, it was a pretty amazing episode. I was pretty shocked to see Darcy, but not unhappy. I mean, I'm always happy for more Darcy. I thought it was a shame she wasn't in Thor 3, so... But yeah, it was just a really great episode. Mixed it up a bit as well. It was nice taking a break from the sort of sitcom-y setup. Yeah, just overall, I think one of the strongest episodes so far, to be honest.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, I loved it as a Marvel fan and an MCU fan. It's hard to, like, think of it as a standalone episode as much, because you think of the other ones and you think, like, of the events that happen and the tone and the setting, you know, the 60s, the 70s, and you get, oh, you know, what's going to be the opening this week? And then this is such a massive change. Yeah, I think it's just one of those where it's just one of those episodes in a series that kind of is filling in the blanks and moving the story along. And I guess because there's so much in the episode that calls back to stuff we've already seen, it's kind of like just a mirror episode of what we've seen. So it's just like, oh, well, what's happening on the other side? And I guess because we're not really following our protagonists, that makes it a bit weird as well, that we're just got an episode full of supporting characters. And this was also the episode where I said to some people, you know, I said at the start of these audio reviews, I was like, oh, you know, I think maybe my mum or someone could watch this because it's all the fun sitcoms and stuff. After this one, I'm like, I don't know, actually, because, you know, it's, if you don't know about, like, Endgame and stuff, you'd start this episode like, what the hell is going on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of stuff in there for, like, hardcore MCU people. And I know that friends of the show and, you know, agree with that there's always that fear, as we've had on, like, the Mandalorians, etc., of, you know, the common man, that, you know, the normal viewer, other people are going to sort of, like, react and enjoy this as much as the hardcore fans. But obviously, as a hardcore fan, I really did love it. I thought it was great. And yeah, I think it maybe take a few more watches, but I think it's a part of the series as opposed to, like, a standalone episode like the other ones have been.
Yeah, I believe I mentioned to you outside of recording that the Mandalorian, you could sort of look at that show, and yes, it's all one story. Each episode was building up to the finale, but at the same time, you could watch each individual episode as its own thing, and you would pretty much wouldn't have a problem with that. this show I'm feeling as becoming that. With the first three, you could go, okay, I prefer the humor more in that one, or some of the jokes landed better in this one. But this episode feels like, nah, you can't look at this show like that. You have to look at this show as one long 5.5 hour piece or something like that. So, yeah, it definitely opened up the world more. It felt a lot more what we expect from the MCU. I thought they walked a really fine line because we got a lot of answers. We got a lot of clarity of what's going on. But they certainly didn't cover everything. And there's a lot more to be figured out, I think. So I think they did a really nice job of that. And, you know, this show, as 4 episodes in, we're pretty much certain that this is a mystery box type of show. And the mystery box, I think, can be dangerous because it can be a very compelling storytelling device, you know, because humans, we love a good mystery, but it's very easy to get fatigued with it, to get fatigued with the constant questioning. And also, once the mystery is sort of unraveled, often at times, the show becomes boring. And I think WandaVision is doing a really nice job of feeding us the information we need for the episodes we've caught up to at this point, giving us enough to go on, helping to clarify things, but still having more mystery and even asking us more questions. You know, there's been some comments that some viewers, that they're getting fatigue of the sitcom formats that we had in the first 3 episodes. So I think this episode was a really great way of taking the people that have been along for the ride, like us, and bringing the people that are a bit unsure and bringing them all into this place that we're all sort of on the same wavelength now. And as you said, Tom, big shout out to the characters Darcy Lewis and Jimmy Woo for bringing them back into the fold. And I really like how they use the characters because we've got a bunch of characters in a TV show asking and doing the same things us, the fans and the viewers, are doing. And it's so brilliantly done. It's really helpful to have them question everything and going on, and the way and hitting everything has been talking about in the show. And I'm just like, fucking chef's kiss, man. Goes back to what I said in the first episode, that I think the writing in the show is superb.
Yeah, I got to agree with that. Because I did love especially when you see Jimmy writing on the boards and he's just written the question on there, why the hexagons? Because like all the fans would be going, why are the hexagons there? What I also love is the fact that, you know, you're looking around Swords, all these people wandering around helping out Darcy and Jimmy. You have to assume 90% of them are Skrulls.
Well, with Secret Invasion coming, yeah.
Yeah, with Secret Invasion coming, the fact that we know Sword was formed from, like, you know, just taking some Skrull refugees and going, oh, we'll work with you then to do this. So I'm wondering if that will play into the show at all, like, not necessarily as, like, oh no, the Skrulls are here, but whether they'll actually, like, show that off as maybe, like, a teaser of things to come in the MCU, like, or maybe just to remind fans, by the way, these are all aliens.
Yeah, Josh Stamberg is the director Tyler Hayward, I think he's called. That he seems like very much like, oh no, he's a Skrull kind of character. Just
yeah, he was also giving me Skrull vibes as well, just because.
Yeah,
you know what? I kind of got bad guy. He's working for AIM vibes.
Could be, and then I have just recently watched Iron Man 3, so I'm down for more AIM, and maybe down for AIM being done correctly.
Yes, yes.
Give me the beekeeper suits.
I don't understand what's happening, but you need to listen to me. Maria died 3 years ago.
No.
Which was 2 years after you...
After I what?
After you disappeared.
Right, so let's get into the actual episode itself then. Like, as we said, it's very different to the sitcom format that we're used to. This is all basically a explanation, info dump of an episode, up, as I said, up to a point. But I want to sort of talk about the opening, because we open the episode with Monica Rambeau returning from the dust form. So we find out that she was actually one of the people that was snapped during Infinity War. And then obviously in Endgame, she came back. And I really want to talk about this intro because what's really great about the MCU and the dusting and this huge epic scale thing that we saw is that we're getting to see different aspects of this huge event that's happened. Now, in Endgame, we saw all the heroes return, really triumphant moment, fist pumping, everyone screaming in the audience. You know, when we watched Far From Home, we saw the band from Peter Parker's school just come out in the middle of a basketball game, and that was used for like a comedic effect. But we've never really seen a moment that it's played out tragically. And I think this one was done really well. It played on the confusion, the fear, the tragedy. So it was a really good way, I think, as an MCU fan, to sort of touch base onto something that we're really familiar as MCU fans, but showing it to us in a new way. What did you guys think of the whole returning from the dust and the panic in the hospital and all that? What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I really liked it because I've always thought that there was such great dramatic potential with that storyline. Just the idea of like what would happen if 50% of the population like vanished. And even though there's been like TV shows and, you know, other properties that have dealt with the same sort of idea, you know, you kind of were watching Endgame thinking like, this is really interesting. I kind of want to just have like a TV show or something like this set in the MCU where you just find out about like the effects of something like this. So it was kind of unfortunate to then have in Far From Home, as much as I enjoy Far From Home, you know, in some ways, I guess that was like a good film to carry on from it because it was so lighthearted and, you know, it was, you know, fun and comedic, etc. But I was always like, well, I hope that's not the end of the blip stuff, because we don't want just the aftermath of the blip to be like, hey, funny, you know, high school hijinks. I was like, there's so much dramatic potential there with that event. I'm glad that we got to see something like this, and I hope that we continue to see stuff like that, like it. I don't necessarily mean that like every time we have a new character introduced in the MCU, they're like, well, what happened to them during the blip? But I think that there will still be a lot of gaps that you need to fill, and it's kind of like in the moment in Far From Home where that guy was just like, you know, what was it? It's like his wife had got together with somebody else and he just appeared back when they were like in bed together or something like that. And it's like, there's so much potential of like crazy stuff that could have happened and things that would have gone down, etc. So that's where I would like to see like all these different like scenarios and events that could have happened. And I think that, this was just a really interesting one. And also I'm glad that it's kind of like it was in the MCU's hands this time, even though they work on the Spider-Man films, ultimately it's still made by Sony. So, you know, potentially that sort of like band appearing in the basketball game, like I said, was done for dramatic effect, but it didn't seem to have the visualization that it has in the MCU of the dust aspect. So that's why here it was nice to see that everyone was like reverse dusting or whatever you want to call it back to existence, because they were like, that's how it appears in the Marvel film, so it makes sense that they would appear in that way. And I don't think it would have had the same dramatic effect if they just all suddenly just, you know, appeared there straight away. Obviously it worked for that, the comedy of that situation before, but I think they did the right call in sort of like having that visual of like, oh, like we know what this is because we remember it from that very famous scene at the end of Infinity War. So I thought that worked as well.
I kind of agree with you that I'd like to see a bit more exploration, even if it's only in small ways, about how the blip affected things. And again, I don't think they should do it like in every film, because otherwise it'll be overdone. It's kind of like how people now make fun of the fact that like, oh, the new villain in this film is someone that Tony Stark wronged in the past. You don't want it to become like a thing where it's this is happening because someone came back from the blip. But it would be quite nice, because the one thing I think Infinity War and Endgame was missing, Infinity War especially, was the universal scale of the issue. We only saw how the blip affected Earth, but it was the entire universe. Like, it would have done wonders if during Infinity War, during the whole dusting scene, they had just quick shots of like Xandar, maybe showing like John C. Reilly's character like getting dusted for some weight there. Show nowhere and show like maybe like just like a bunch of people dusting, and just I think they were missing that. Just that I think it would have made it feel a little bit more epic. So it would be nice if maybe in the next Guardians film or whatever next cosmic film they have, they do show some effects of the dusting there, so we can see how it played out universe wide. But it was a really nice, I think, change of pace. just seeing it at the start of this episode, as David said, it was crazy, it was confusing for everyone. Monica's there going like, wait, how is my mum dead? Like, she was fine 20 minutes ago, you gave her the all clear, and the doctor's like, okay, so you've been gone 5 years.
Yeah.
She'd been dead 3. Soz.
That's the crazy thing about it. And I think even if it's not just, what's the effects of coming back 5 years late? Well, there's the dramatic effects of just the beginning of it as well, is the fact that somebody could be there. Like, you know, I think we joked about this on my podcast before, but just imagine the scenarios that might have happened. You know, there could have been like people like holding children who might have got dusted, and the child like falls down, and you know, them crazy stuff. You know, like,
I mean, the helicopter that crashed, so that pilot just appeared in midair. He's like, oh no,
yeah,
this is not great.
Airplanes and stuff. Like, my God, they must have. But it's also the fact that we've seen before that big events have had repercussions, like you said, Tom, rather than it just being like, oh, you know, this is somebody who has a vendetta against Tony Stark, but it could be like a Zemo situation of like, well, you know, you destroyed Sokovia, you killed my family, and there could be an element of somebody who lost everything from the blip. You know, they might have lost their family, etc. Yeah, they might have come back, but, you know, maybe they just moved on with their life too much. They might have lost their business, they might have lost everything. So there's that element as well, that, you know, you could in the future have people that were affected by the blip. And as we saw in Endgame, you know, you had like the harbor in New York was filled with boats and stuff like that. So there's obviously the world was operating differently. So I think that we'll see some ramifications for that for potential characters in the future, about how their lives were ruined or changed, and how maybe it got even worse when their loved ones returned again, because, you know, like Hawkeye, if Hawkeye hadn't sort of been brought back by his, you know, fellow Avengers, by Black Widow, then he would have been in quite a dark place for his family to come back at that point. So, yeah, I think we might see some stuff like that. But yeah, I did love in this situation that it, you know, it was just the idea of, to Monica, she was just like, what are you on about? I was just sat in the room 2 seconds ago. And it's like, to take that on board, you could only sympathize with it in the situation. You're like, wow, imagine that happening. Imagine just, because it would just feel like you just nodded off and you woken up and you were like, I loved how she just played it, that like, is this my fault? I'm sorry I fell asleep kind of thing. It's like, it's horrible.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you with the Hawkeye thing, because I think it's even been confirmed that in the Hawkeye series, we might get some further backstory as his time as Ronin during those 5 years. So I do think we're going to be getting more repercussions of the blip, and as you said, Dave, told from the MCU way, not the Sony way. So I think there's definitely more there to explore. And I think on a thematic level, this is a really good way of opening a show, because you're basically explaining to Monica that Monica, she is dealing with loss. She's lost her mum. Do you know what I mean? And like, I think this is really important, because this entire show, in a way, if we're led to believe that this is a show about loss, and we have one character, the lead, Wanda, who, you know, let's just say isn't letting go of the loss, you know, and we also have Monica, we have this new character, which right off the bat deals with this massive piece of loss, and right away she tries to move past it. So we have two different characters who are dealing with loss in very different ways. So I think that was a really good way of setting up this episode and giving more backstory to who Monica is. And obviously the backstory that we'll get onto now is that we find out that, you know, coming out of the post-credit scene from Far From Home, I don't know about you guys, but the word on the street, sort of like the general people talking about it, and I thought this, that Sword seemed like a new thing, that we sort of thought Nick Fury was building Sword out in the absence of S.H.I.E.L.D. But what we find out in this episode was that it was actually Maria Rambeau was one of the co-founders of Sword. And similar to the first Cap film, where Peggy Carter and Tony Stark sort of create S.H.I.E.L.D. out of the events of the first Avenger, was sort of getting that with Captain Marvel as well, and how she created Sword. So Sword's been around for a while. We just didn't know about it. What do you guys think of that revelation in the show?
I quite liked it. I wasn't expecting it as well. Like, initially I was taken aback when she was like, oh, my mother started this organization from nothing. And I was like, okay, that's a interesting thing. I also kind of like, Well, I just thought of this now as you were like pointing it out. Like, obviously, First Avenger, yeah, that caused S.H.I.E.L.D. to be formed based around Captain America, famous wielder of the shield. Sword is formed from Captain Marvel, who is very clearly the sword in any given situation. You know, she's the one you just like, okay, we need a quick win here, throw in Captain Marvel, she can just blow shit up. So yeah, I did quite like that revelation, because as well, it just means that Sword is, they can just bring it in as an established organization, rather than have to like focus on building it up and just like showing how they built up Sword. Now they can just say, yeah, Sword is built, it's here, it's full of Skrulls, don't worry about it for now. And we'll probably end up getting a bit more flavour on how it all got formed in the Secret Invasion series anyway, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. But yeah, I thought it was a interesting way to tie it all in. Should hopefully tie into Captain Marvel 2 as well. And what I'm also thinking is, because obviously this was another thing me and Dave had some differing opinions on. Clearly Monica doesn't have her powers yet. David was right. But yeah, if this all ends up tying into Captain Marvel 2 in some way, like we have Sword there, we have Monica there, that's probably how she'll end up getting her powers. And I think they might end up setting her up to take the name Photon, because obviously they keep showing that was her mother's like call sign. I can't remember who. Last time I was reading comics with Monica Rambeau, and she was going by Spectrum, I think. But Photon is arguably cooler, so I'd be happy for them to choose Photon as her MCU name, provided that they are planning on giving her powers. I feel like they are. You can't just introduce Monica Rambeau and then go, yeah, we're never going to power her up ever.
Yeah, and also say that she's going to be in Captain Marvel 2 alongside Miss Marvel. You're like, of course, like, she's going to, like...
They both just fly off and leave her there, like,
bye
guys, you know, like we're going to say.
Pardon me, Sheriff. Would you mind repeating your claim about Westview to my colleague here?
No such place.
You're saying the town of Westview, New Jersey doesn't exist.
Okay, so we quickly move on to the story where Monica meets our favorite character, and that's Jimmy Woo. I don't know if you guys saw, I saw this at the moment it happened, but as he introduced himself and flipped the card out of his hand, there was just so much satisfaction going through my body. I was like, yes! He learned the card trick from Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh, yeah, I was so happy to see him again. So happy.
Yeah, it was great, and I thought he was used really well. His comedic timing is amazing. Like, Randall Park is fantastic at comedy. And then we start to get more characters. You know, we get Kat Dennings, who's played Darcy Lewis, and some other scientists all brought in to try and figure out what the hell is going on in Westview. And this is where, obviously, the show's all weird, but this is where we get a little bit more weirdness, where Jimmy Woo is sort of explaining to Monica that it seems to be that outside this dome or world that Wanda's creating, like the surrounding areas and the people, she also seems to be affecting them in some way. Because when we talk to the policeman, he's like, there's no such thing as Westview. Do you know what I mean? Like, no such thing. There's a town right there that says Westview. And then when she asks, well, where are you from? And he goes, Eastview. So I'm just a bit like, what is going on? Do you think Wanda's powers are accentuating outside of this dome to affect like the surrounding areas as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of like, I can't remember whether it's Jimmy or Monica who says it, but because they end up theorizing on the same thing. They're like, well, how come we have an awareness of Westview, but these people don't? And they say, well, maybe it's because we don't have a connection to it. So because they don't have a connection to it, maybe Wanda isn't able to, like, I don't know what the word is, seep out her powers like that far to like affect them. I think we haven't talked enough about the fact that, you know, her powers were created from an Infinity Stone. Technically, there should be no limit to her powers.
And if it is the Mind Stone, mind control.
It did always weird me out that they never went for the Reality Stone to create Wanda, but hey ho, that we'll just roll with that. But yeah, I think anything could happen at this point. All my theories have been thrown out the window so far. With the exception of Mephisto, that could still be a thing, because I think when they were like casting all the town into the show, I think the two people they didn't cast were Dottie and Agnes. I could be wrong there, but I'm sure they didn't show Dottie being cast as anyone in the town. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're spot on. Because I put that in my notes as well, that once they're starting to gather on the information about who's in here, because, Darcy figures out that there's a broadcast frequency, she gets the big TV, and they see that the sitcom is happening in front of them. And when they're laying out all the casts, they've all got IDs next to them, except Agnes. That's not by accident. There's definitely a reason why she hasn't got an ID. Whether or not they don't know who she is she an external force that's manipulating Wanda? Or is she like some sort of magical being that they have no idea about, a.k.a. Agatha Harkness? But,
Well, that's what I loved about that sequence. I loved the idea of just like, seeing Jimmy just there as like, Herb is cast as, and I thought that was great. That's where I thought the episode really got in its stride of just being like dealing with the fun aspects of it. And it goes back to what I said in the first episode, wasn't it? I was just like, is Wanda, broadcasting this? Is this? And I was like, I was right. Yeah, I was like, so when Darcy was there, just like, it's like, there's another signal here. And I kind of, at first, I was like, what? Why would you immediately just be like, oh, yeah, there's a massive spike in radiation or whatever it was. And she was like, get me an old TV. And I was like, that's a bit of a leap. But then when they had the later scene and she said, oh, there was a television signal within there, I was like, okay, I can buy into it now.
Gotta say, Darcy has come a long way from being a political science major who didn't know what an Einstein-Rosen bridge was, and now she is like an expert in... I mean, to be fair, for her in universe, it's been about, 10, 15 years since the events of Thor? Well, maybe not 15, that sounds a bit long.
10 years, yeah, no, 10 years, yeah, 2013... Yeah. And then in the current timeline, they're in 2023. So, yeah.
There we go, then. And so she spent 10 years hanging around with Selvig and Foster. So clearly she's picked up a lot. And she clearly switched disciplines as well from political science. Because when I was rewatching Thor the other day, that's one of my favorite lines when she's just like, what's an Einstein-Rosen bridge? And he's just like, I thought you were a scientist. Political science. She was the only applicant.
That's what I was glad what they've done with this character is that they have, I don't want to say make her useful, but she kind of was just there as the comic relief in those films. You were kind of like, why is she the assistant? Why is she there? And so the fact that, they've given her, that she is like, no, I'm actually a scientist. I've got reason why I've been at these events and stuff. I like that they've given her some, worth and credit in that sense, which I think is good. But also I'm just impressed at how the show is managing to introduce these characters, because I think going into it, it was like, well, are we going to have somebody like Monica just be like, oh, hey, this is Monica Rambeau, by the way, or be like, they introduce the character and then everyone online's like, oh, that's Monica Rambeau, and we'll get more of her in the films, etc. But no, they actually go through the like, this is her mum. This is what's happened since. This is maybe why she's got involved in S.W.O.R.D. because of her mum and because of Captain Marvel. And, this is the stuff she's doing. She's involved with spaceflight, all that kind of stuff. So I was really impressed with how they introduced the character, told us everything we need to know. I thought the beginning was a bit on the nose of literally being like, she can hear Captain Marvel's voice when she's asleep. I'm like, does she just, remember that all the time? But
that was just a cheeky little nod, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I liked how they're able to set up these characters like Darcy and Monica in a way that kind of makes sense, but gives us all the information we need to know without it just being like they're just thrown in there kind of thing, which I think is something that Marvel's very good at.
I also like the difference in Darcy's character, because she's not taking any shit from anyone. As pretty much as soon as we meet her, what was his name? The army guy, whatever he is, and he's like, Miss Lewis, and she's like, Dr. Lewis, like straight on this.
Still waiting on that coffee.
Yeah, I just loved it when she goes to pick up the big, like, I don't know what to call it, spectrometer or something, and she's just looking at the army guy going, oh no, don't worry, I got this.
Yeah, and to add to that, I also think, like you said, Dave, she was the comedic relief in the first two Thor films, but they're giving her so far it seems a more weightier role in this, while still keeping the comedic stuff. But we're getting the same thing with Jimmy Woo as well. He was the sort of the Ant-Man films are basically comedies, but he was the ultimate comic relief of that film, you know, to sort of pull you away from the main action and stuff like that. So it's really great they're utilizing him now in a more weightier role. And yeah, he's got the quips, he's got the jokes, he's got the card flip and everything, but he's also involved in the storytelling moving forward.
I feel like we're talking about Gambit or something. He's like, he's got the card flipped. I'm like, are we
Oh
talking
my
about
god,
Gambit?
Jimmy Woo is Gambit confirmed. This is how they bring the X-Men in. We've cracked it. We've cracked the mystery.
Scott Lang trained, you know, Gambit. You know, he's going to turn up in a wheelchair one day, like I taught all of them.
Oh, I love it.
Is there somewhere a lady could get a cup of coffee? You guys look like you might get down with those little pod things. Horrendous for the environment, you know?
Make your assessment, please.
So yeah, to continue on the story then, we have them like sending different stuff in. So this is all really cleverly tying in with what we've seen in the first 3 episodes. So we first get like the helicopter thing, where I found this really interesting, where it's a completely different drone helicopter to what we saw. So it's really interesting that as you go into this dome, Wanda's powers or whatever's at play here transforms either you, a person, or the item into what it would look like in that era of sitcom. But the color remains. And I really like this detail because, you know, Jimmy Woo asked his associate, like, why'd you colorize it? And he's like, I didn't. So what is in play there?
Yeah.
Do you think that is maybe a Wanda changing the look of the item but not being fully in control to completely change the color?
Probably, because I am getting this sense that like there's a dichotomy of Wanda being obviously fully in control of the situation at hand while simultaneously not being in control of it at all because she's not in control of herself right now. So like part of me is wondering if like stuff like that, like her leaving the helicopter color or her like just switching to an ad break when Jimmy is like trying to reach out to her, whether it's like somewhere subconsciously deep down she is trying to like find ways out of this situation she's put herself in, like she's trying to get out these like subtle little hints to people in some way like through this, but she doesn't fully realize she's doing it. I don't know, I'm hoping it's something that will be answered in the coming episodes, but at this point I'm really not sure what it could mean that these things are coming in color, other than the fact that, as I said, maybe it's just Wanda is not fully aware of all the decisions she's making at this point. So maybe there's a degree of self-sabotage there. Maybe she realizes what she's doing is wrong and she needs help, but she's just too deep into it to just like stop and go, okay guys, take me in, I need help. I don't know. It's
Do you think this is a theory I have, but do you think that maybe seeing the color freaked her out so much that she was like, right, I've got to change the show to color now, so it's not as out there, it's not as obvious? I don't know. It could be like
because like initially, like if you remember, I was thinking maybe they switched the color because through her powers, Vision was becoming less of like an idea and more real. But that could also make a lot of sense as well if, as you said, she's like trying to cover up all the stuff that reminds her of the outside world, because that does seem to be the thing. She's just wanting to create this whole world where nothing outside of it ever happens, none of the bad stuff happens. So anything that references the real world, even if it doesn't directly reference her and Vision, yeah, she is going to want to get rid of that. So I quite like that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
There's also the fact that, again, people, you know, so she could be because there's such this emphasis on, like, you know, who these civilians are cast as and who they become, etc. So it could just be that she's focusing a lot of energy on the people, and we assume that most of the items or props, whatever we want to call them, within this world are created. So it could just be that once an object comes in, that she's not. It's something that's like overlooked. And I guess when she sees something like that, like we saw in the second episode when the glass smashed, you know, the blood was red. So it's when she gets freaked out by something from the outside world. But as we've seen with Monica, obviously she was just immediately in, you know, the 50s and 60s sort of like look. So she's probably a lot more in control of like the cast, because she's, specifically done this. Because, let's not forget the end of this episode, which was, Monica just laying there like, it's Wanda, it's all Wanda, so that I think is interesting to a degree as well, because like we said, there's been this conversation we've been having all along, like how much control is she, and as Jimmy says, who's doing this to you, Wanda? But at the end of it, he says, it's all Wanda. So I think that is interesting as well. So it could be, just like I said, the fact that she's more focused on the cast, which would also make sense with the beekeeper, which I think is probably the other biggest one, because as Jake sort of speculated before, that suit, he goes in there as like a sword agent, and I suppose then turns into a beekeeper because those suits kind of look beekeeper-like. And I think that's interesting again. So there was like, it's not like he was like red or yellow or anything. So again, maybe she's more in control of like cast members and people, but the little breakages are in. But even then, I suppose we've seen from the trailers that people start to mess up and stuff. Herb is like, cutting into a wall and stuff. So I think we just know that there's breaks at all points of this. But it's probably originally she has a lot more control of the world and a lot more control of the people. But bit by bit, it's like objects. Then it starts to turn into people. And then it's just all of it.
Yeah, and I love when they're starting to work out what's actually happening. And, our speculation was correct in a way, so they sort of bring up the cosmic radiation stuff of the blip, that this could be sort of affecting it. And one of my favorite lines in the whole episode was by Jimmy Woo, where he says, "So the universe created a sitcom starring 2 Avengers?" Which I thought was
yeah,
I thought that was really funny how they did that.
I also just like the idea that because we had Monica there, like seeing the after effects of the blip, I just like the idea that then Wanda would have, gone to Tony's funeral, etc., had that conversation with Hawkeye about losing vision and etc., and then just would have been like, right, I'm going to go live in the suburbs then, just walk there and be like, yeah, this is the thing now, and it just immediately does it. I just...
yeah, just instantaneously, just like, what was Clint saying? Forget it.
I'm going to make a town.
That's what I'm interested in, is in the time scale of this. Is this like a year after Endgame? Is it, because we don't really know. We just see Monica just rock up at, sword, but we don't know how long that is after she was at the hospital, or do we?
3 weeks. Because the director, well, the acting director, because I have bad vibes about that guy, but he does mention when she arrives to the sword headquarters, it's been 3 weeks since everyone's come back and you're the only one to return.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. So Wanda just had a really rough 3 weeks, basically.
We don't know enough about the nature of the threat to send in another agent when the first is yet to return.
Someone must really miss you back at Quantico.
No, sir. Softball season's over, sir.
Let's talk about the end of the episode, pretty much, which is because the sword are tracking Geraldine, aka Monica, and then we get to the ending of last week's episode, which is the 70s, where Wanda basically loses it. I love this episode because we got to see, obviously, the whole scene play out as it was. Wanda shooting her through all those doors and walls and then outside the world. And again, we got very little of them, but Elizabeth Olsen in this moment, again, her acting is just shining through. She's sinister, she's evil looking, and I'm scared of her. Like, just that look she gave Monica, I was like, oh shit, like, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, Monica, you really should have played that a bit more carefully. This is not a woman you want to... I mean, you could tell, because, like, Monica was very clearly scared when, like, Wanda started, like, turning on her. So, like, Monica is fully aware of, like, Wanda's power set. But, yeah, it was kind of terrifying. And huge props to Elizabeth Olsen for her acting in that, because I thought she just played the part perfectly. And it was good to actually see Wanda's powers again, like, rather than just her doing, like, a little, like, click and then things are happening. We actually get to see her, like, weird hand movement things and the red stuff, and love it.
And, like, just the fact that she just plows her through, like, just house after house through the fence. I was like, that is harsh. Like, wow.
To add to the spookiness, we then see Vision as we saw him in Infinity War when Thanos pulled the stone out of his head, all grey, that his forehead all caved in. As soon as I saw that, I was like, "Oh shit!"
No pupils.
Yeah, no
like,
pupils.
No
I was
eyes,
like,
geez.
"Oh shit!" Wanda is losing it. It's all starting to crumble around her.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Was that like reality sort of breaking, and that's how Vision was, or was that literally just in Wanda's mind? Like, what parts of Wanda's breakdown are in her mind, and what is actually happening?
I know. I hope this is a figment. Like, she's just like, I can't think of other things where this has happened. There's like an example in my head, but yeah, where somebody sort of imagines a character another way, and I hope that was just her like flashing back to the last time she like officially saw him or something. I hope she's not just there with like his dead corpse. Yeah, like like just.
I wonder though if somehow through this show we might get like Vision coming back in a way, because Tom, you'd probably be able to back me up in this, but in the comics, Vision does eventually become all grey. And does he not join the new Avengers?
Yeah, that was a whole thing, because I remember people initially came up with that theory, like in the end of Infinity War, they were like, oh, they made him look kind of like he was in these issues of Avengers, when, yeah, he did join the new Avengers, but, I mean, he could definitely, like, come back in some way, because, I mean, like any comic book character, Vision has died about, I can't even count the number of times he's died and come back, to be honest.
I mean, he's an android.
Exactly. So,
So-
it's often a plot point. It's just like, oh, he's dead, he's come back, but oh no, he's a bit more robotic this time than he was before, and then it's just like, it's pretty much the same character, really. He's just adding a bit of drama for no reason. But yeah, I think we could see Vision come back in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, I think part of me is wondering if they're taking the idea of Wanda created her own children to also be like Wanda's also bringing Vision back to the fold. So maybe by the end of it, we'll see Wanda maybe either dead or in exile, and then Vision's left to just pick up the pieces himself. And then we'll probably see Wanda again then in Doctor Strange 2. I've actually seen some theories as well that maybe like Wanda and Agnes are keeping Doctor Strange within the village, like under lock and key, because obviously he'd see what was going on with Wanda, and he'd be straight there just going, let's maybe calm down a little, let's breathe, think things through. So yeah, that could be a thing that happens later on.
I mean, I mentioned, we could sort of go to like speculation and theories now, but I sort of mentioned in our group chat that Paul Bettany had an interview this week, and he said that he got to work with an actor he's always wanted to work with, and he also specifically said he. So it is a male actor that he says it's a huge surprise for MCU fans, and he's always wanted to work with this actor. I don't know about you guys, but my money's on Benedict Cumberbatch, and possibly Doctor Strange appearing in this show, as we've just discussed, and the show leads into the Doctor Strange sequel. Wouldn't it kind of make sense for him to make an appearance?
Yeah, I think it definitely would, because I remember some people as well trying to theorize that like Nightmare was the villain of the WandaVision series, and I know initially Nightmare was meant to be the Doctor Strange 2 villain.
Yeah, that's true.
But
well, yeah, there's only so many times they can have these like mystical events happen and Doctor Strange doesn't get involved. It's like in Thor Ragnarok, he's just like, Loki's on Earth, I'm going to deal with it. So, if there is, especially as we've mentioned, like characters like Mephisto or Agnes, you would hope that he would get involved, or somebody
he
from
says
that
in Thor
order.
Ragnarok to Thor, he's just like, I keep a list of beings that may cause harm to the Earth in the future. And then in Infinity War, Hulk is there like, Thanos is coming! The great evil in the universe is coming to destroy us all. And Doctor Strange is like, who the hell is Thanos? Who is this guy?
He did say like mystical powers. So, I wouldn't be surprised if Doctor Strange kind of is already aware of Agatha Harkness in a way.
Oh yeah, he must be.
I don't think Agatha's a character that, here she is in the MCU. I think she's a character very much like Mephisto that's just been there throughout history, really, in the shadows, hiding, doing whatever business they want to do.
I also think it's interesting when I looked at the music that they played at the end of the episode. The song is Voodoo Child, from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, which I was like, oh, like what's going on here? Which is fun. At the same time, I also saw the song title for the Beach Boys song that was playing when they came through the radio, and that's called "Help Me, Wanda," which I thought was interesting because I was like, oh, Wanda, and then like, potentially Monica Rambeau, like, Rambeau, Wanda, like combine those, Rhonda. I was like, maybe.
I've just come up with this theory now, and I'm just going to stick with this. Maybe they had Voodoo Child at the end of the episode because they're going to introduce Voodoo into this season. Now that's a character I would love to see them introduce.
Is he not another Doctor Strange villain, I think? Or has he come up against Doctor Strange?
Yeah, Brother
Voodoo.
He's either Brother Voodoo or Doctor Voodoo, I can't remember. But like last time I was reading him, he was part of the Uncanny Avengers alongside Cable and Synapse and all that. So he was definitely in the Uncanny Avengers for a bit, so he's definitely like got some good aspects. But anyway, in either way, they should bring the character into the show. Why not? Just bring more mystical characters into the MCU, I say. And this show is the perfect vehicle to do that.
Yeah, well, there's this show, Doctor Strange coming up, the whole multiverse stuff. Yeah, I think we're on Earth, that is, in the MCU, we're moving away from the cosmic stuff and getting more into this magical, multi-dimensional stuff.
What about this first theory? Sorry, in terms you said about actor that Paul Bettany's always wanted to work alongside. What if it's Chiwetel Ejiofor?
Oh,
they're like, oh yeah, this mystical guy.
Oh,
what if they're like this, mystic who understands magic, and they're like, yeah, this guy makes sense, and then he like goes there, he's like, I'm gonna steal this magic. They're like, oh no, we should have got this guy.
Shit, no, you blow my mind.
Pisses Wanda off, and then she rips open the multiverse.
You blow my mind.
Yes, bring Mordo in, please. Oh my god,
please, because at the end of Doctor Strange, he's like, no more sorcerers, all this stuff he wants to take.
Yeah, instead of no more mutants, no more sorcerers. Oh my god, guys. We've done it. House of M, House of Mordo. There it is.
I was always scared that when he had that end scene, I was like, please don't go chasing after Wanda. I don't want us to like nuke this powerful character. Don't be like, just have Wanda as a vehicle to like power him up. And now that they've given her own series and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm fairly confident they're not going to do that. But they could have him attempt to steal her powers, and that's what like she breaks open the multiverse then, which could be fun.
Honestly, Dave,
I think we've written the show, guys. We've written the show.
I want to see that fucking show. Like.
Yeah, I need to get a Reddit going.
If this doesn't happen, I'm getting straight onto Twitter and I'm like, guys, did you not hear us on episode 4 of our podcast? We had this down.
Entwined was a broadcast frequency, so I had your goons pick me up a sweet vintage TV, and when I plug this bad boy in, voila, sound and picture.
Dinner is served.
So you're saying the universe created a sitcom starring 2 Avengers?
Do you guys have any favorite moments from this episode? Maybe a line or a sequence of stuff?
Yes, my absolute favorite in the entire episode was, isn't there someone at Quantico missing you? No, sir. Softball season is over. That's the best line in the entire episode, hands down.
That is a good one.
Yeah, no, I just thought the whole episode was great. It was just packed full of big moments and big, like, oh shit moments. Just watching them all, like, gathered around the TV and, like, Darcy getting emotional over it. And she's like, well, I'm invested. I kind of like the chemistry that Darcy and Jimmy have as well. I'm not saying that in a way of like, ooh, let's see if they get together. But if they did, I think it could be quite cute. But equally, if they were just like Bezzy Muckers, I think that would also be adorable. I'd like to see more of Jimmy and Darcy in the future, is basically what I'm saying.
Dave, do you have any particular standout moments or lines or anything?
Like I mentioned earlier, I did enjoy the coffee joke. Still haven't got that coffee, and where she has that banter where he's like, oh, you've realized this, and she's like, yes, what does she say to him? Like, she's sort of like, yes, I managed to figure something out. And then he's saying, like, do you know what's happening? She's like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I've managed to connect some dots and everything like that. So all of that was great. And yeah, I also really enjoyed like the aspect of just, like just seeing Jimmy there, like blah, 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 cast as this. And, it was just great, kind of, tie in, the strings together on the map kind of stuff and having the fun, because it is a sitcom of saying like blah, 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 cast as this. I also enjoyed when Darcy when they got to that moment in the show of when the Ultron part came up, and then it just cut, and it was just them sat down. It kind of reminded me of in the third episode when Vision starts to question things, and it just like cuts to like the more idyllic version. It was like that. So like I mentioned in the first episode about, is she broadcasting this herself? It is that she is broadcasting this idyllic version as well, that she's just like, no, don't like that, take that out of the episode, that kind of stuff. So I like that. I thought that was quite cool. And then, yeah, just seeing her saying, this is our home and everything like that. There's obviously a lot of, a very sinister nature to all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think as well it's worth mentioning, because like it's like the theory I saw online I don't agree with, but it does kind of lead into some speculation that's worth speculating about. And it was basically this article arguing that the Vulture is going to end up in this series. I was like, what?
Spring them all in.
Why?
Mordo, yeah. Vulture,
Yeah, but apparently the thinking was that the reason Jimmy Woo goes to that town is because there is someone there under witness protection who went missing, and that's how he discovers the town is missing. So there is, like, whilst it might not mean anything, it might just be a random ordinary person in witness protection that Jimmy Woo was going to, like, check up on, but it could also maybe lead to potentially there's another character involved in the mix there, not the Vulture. I don't see how the Vulture would tie into this. I think the article's logic was like, oh, well, we saw at the end of that Spider-Man movie he was being threatened in prison, and it was like, no, someone asked him if he knew who Spider-Man was, and he said he didn't. It's not him being threatened in prison, is it? That's just a bit of macho behaviour between him and Scorpion. But it does lead to the question, like, what if this person in witness protection program is someone we've seen before in the MCU, someone who could potentially be quite important to the story, or may have a role in the story in some way? Or again, it could just be nothing, and it could just be like they needed to find a reason why Jimmy would be there, and they just went, witness protection program, you went to check up on someone.
The weird thing I found about that scene was the fact that he was like, do you not feel it? Like, it doesn't want me to go in and stuff. But I just found it strange that I don't know, it just screamed to me like, oh, we're on a set, and there's like, this is green screen, there's no town there. I didn't like the fact that, like, Monica didn't at any point go, have you tried walking into the town? Or, like, it just seems strange to me that they did that wall thing, but there was no point in which she was like, maybe we should go in, or like, I don't know, they were focusing so much on the cops and the entire situation, and again, the drone. I was like, has anyone actually tried walking in there? Because it seemed weird to me.
Because, like, even though, like, it was cool to see, like, or get it confirmed, it's like, okay, Monica doesn't have her powers yet, so she'll get those later. As I said to you in our podcast last week, like, I was thinking that she would have had her powers because it would make sense that someone who could utilize or travel at the speed of light could break through a energy or reality barrier, or whatever you want to call it. So I was left a little bit disappointed when Monica literally just walked through it. This big, huge barrier that's meant to separate Wanda, this all-powerful, almost, like, cosmic deity type character, like, is meant to keep her separate from the world, but people can just, like, wander in if they want to.
Yeah. I didn't mind that so much. It was just, I just found it bizarre that they didn't try that before. Like, that would be my first instinct, would just be like, well, let's just go in,
my thoughts on that though is that by Monica going in, effectively she does create like a glitch in this world that Wanda's created. So maybe it is sort of easy enough to get in, and as soon as she sort of touched it, she got like sucked in pretty quickly, and like you don't see her anymore. I think it's an element of that yeah, people can come into this world, but it's a world that Wanda has created, so therefore it causes some form of glitch and causes Wanda to keep freaking out. Maybe that's why towards the end of it, as well as all the other things we've been speculating about with Nightmare, Mordo and all that, maybe it's Sword, just going in there, all guns blazing, that causes her to freak out because it's so out of her reality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think that... Well, no, thinking about it, though, is that he does say it doesn't want me to go in, and those police officers are like, we're from Eastview. So I think if it does help you, Tom, this kind of sort of lends to her... I don't know whether it says she's superpowered, but we said previously that Wanda seems to have some influence on people outside. So I guess that maybe she is stopping people from going in, but not so much in the way of like you can't get through the force field. It's more that like the further you walk towards it, the more you're like, oh, I don't need to go in there. Or like the police officers, you'd be like, oh, I'm not from this town. Oh, I'm going to go get my eggs in a different town. You would turn around, it'd be that. It's like the Simpsons movie where, there's the sat nav, like you are now approaching nowhere, it's just be
like in episode 3, last week's episode, where the doctor's like, Bermuda, baby, and he never actually goes. And then it's like, oh, small town. So it could be that sort of energy that the closer you get to this town, you're like, that. I don't know about you guys, but have you ever seen like a spooky old house or a spooky old castle or something, and the closer you get to it, like at nighttime, don't you get like a weird feeling like, ooh, I probably shouldn't go in there and stuff like that? It's probably like that, but on a cosmic level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what Jimmy was feeling. So he like just felt like he couldn't go in. It was like he was like influenced. So I suppose that in that sense that Monica was able to sort of overcome that, whether that's just because of her curious nature anyway, or because she's had interaction with supernatural characters in the past, that she can kind of override that kind of fear, or so, that, or like I said, maybe she has got some sort of powers already and she's not as easily influenced. So because obviously the way that they try to get in is that they send somebody like underground, like in a tunnel or something. So it does suggest that it's not as easy. Otherwise, they would have just had somebody go through the force field on a rope, which is another thing I liked. I liked how it became a skipping rope. I thought that was fun.
And clearly now their only other option is to send someone in from the sky. Just drop someone in over the top. They've come up from the underneath. They've just walked straight through. Just drop someone in there. Maybe that's how Vulture ends up in it. They're just like, we need someone to... Quick, Vulture, fly in there.
Yeah, I wonder what Sword's next move will be. They will be interesting. I think we will go back to the sitcom sort of stuff.
Well, that was...
So yeah.
I was sort of going to ask that as the next question. I'm pretty... We're going to go back to the sitcom format next week, and possibly the week after that, with the 80s and 90s. But do you think we're going to get another one of these type of episodes? Maybe watch a couple of sitcoms, get caught up on a bit more information, and then go to like the last 2 episodes or something? What do you guys think?
I don't know, because like Vision is clearly waking up to the fact that Wanda is not well, so to speak. He
that sounds like a very husband sort of thing to do. My wife is not well.
As she's like altering reality, she's a bit under the weather. Hellish sounds come from the kitchen. Or maybe if you come back tomorrow, she'll be a bit better. But no, like just the look he was like giving. Like obviously, every time Wanda was looking at him on the sofa, he'd like sort of smile at her. But then as soon as she turned away to look at Tommy or Billy, he just have this look on his face like, shit.
Something is very wrong here. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know, I think we're going to start seeing like more of like Wanda attempting to keep the sitcom vibes going, but Vision being like, no, look, we need to talk about what's happening. She's just going to be like, oh no, an old drinking buddy has come back and he's a transsexual now. Oh, let's go through that trope. Not making any jibes. That is just a genuine like sitcom trope that used to be a thing in every comedy. I don't think they'll be brave enough to bring that in. Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of that, like Wanda trying to just like cover her tracks, make everything seem like it's normal, and Vision's just like, but this is not normal. Like we see in the trailers, like that sort of scene where Vision is dressed up as himself from the comics in that awful costume, and Wanda's obviously dressed up as Scarlet Witch. And there's that scene where he's like walking through the town, but in the trailer it seems quite dramatic, like he's walking through the town with like a lot of purpose, like he's got that look on his face like something's like happening. So I think clearly when we get to that episode, I think that's going to be when a lot of the shit hits the fan with Wanda. I think that's going to be where Vision's finally like, look, we really cannot ignore this any longer. Something weird's going on here, and I think you need help. And then she's just gonna be like, nah, Avengers disassembled, Wanda time.
Yeah, I think that's the 90s episode that's been confirmed via Funko Pop.
Thank you, Funko Pop,
because they had the 2 pops of them in the Halloween outfits, and it said 90s Wanda, 90s Vision. So We won't get that next week, but we probably will get that the following week.
Yes, I think the next episode is the one where we'll get all those trailer shots of like the babies like playing up, and Vision want to be like, "Oh no, what's happening?" So.
I can't wait to see Agnes in her 80s aerobic gear.
Yeah.
I just want more of Agnes, and I just want confirmation that she's Agatha. What if, right, it's a red herring and she's not actually Agatha Harkness? What if she's actually Mephisto?
Brilliant.
We just don't know at this point. Maybe Vision is really Mephisto. I don't know anymore.
Maybe Wanda's Mephisto.
Of course. She's been the devil this entire time.
An aspect we were talking about before, though, was whether these episodes are going to, like Jake said, will it be sitcom, back to the real world? Or do you think we'll now start to have a blend of sitcom and flipping back and forth between? Now that they could easily be like, we've introduced this other world now, will we now flip between?
The reason I struggle with that is, are you constantly going to be flipping aspect ratio? The way they've been doing it so far, the changes in the aspect ratio and stuff, has been really clever. But if you're going to be constantly going real world, Wanda's world, real world, Wanda's sitcom world, it's going to get very jarring, I think. So I think you have to do it.
Have you never seen a Michael Bay IMAX?
Listen.
Don't bring Michael Bay into this.
Let's not talk about those transform. God, please, no.
Wanda, I'm just your neighbor.
Then how did you know about Ultron? You're not my neighbor. And you're definitely not my friend.
Right, let's wrap this thing up here then. So, any final thoughts from you guys about this episode?
A+, 10 out of 10. Need more. Send help. That's my thoughts.
Gotta send Tom some more WandaVision episodes.
I need more WandaVision. I need it now. I'm heavy invested in binge culture, okay? I need instant gratification and lazy writing that they can get away with because you're watching all the episodes in a row. That's what I need.
I'm not going to bring that topic up on this show, but everybody listening should know what Tom is referencing.
Exactly. I love the subtle burn. I love it. I'm also I'm looking forward to going back to the sitcoms. I did miss it this week. I can't wait to get another theme song. The 70s one is still stuck in my head, so I need another one to get stuck in my head. I'm still gunning for that, turn to camera 90s one. They better do it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But I don't know. I think they will. I just don't want it to be another 3 episodes of like dropping clues and then be like, oh, now let's look at it from the other point of view again. It's like, all right, we've done that now. I hope they don't do that again. So I think that the in between of that is either cut between them, because I don't know, they might just keep it widescreen now that they've kind of established that, or like I said, we just we have the next episode, then we maybe go back to the real world again straight away next time. So I think they need to mix it. Now that they've opened Pandora's box in that way, I think that they need to revisit it more quickly. I wouldn't want it just to be the end of the series again, but we'll see. It might work, as you said. If the drama inside the sitcom world is captivating and epic enough, then it might not be a problem. But at the same time, we do know that Kat Dennings, etc., I think, they are casting quite a few episodes, so I'd be surprised again if we don't see them for a while.
Yeah, I think like you two, I love this episode. Gave us a lot of answers, but also brought us a lot more questions, and I think Marvel are really good at doing that. I think we're going to get maybe a mixture of what you're describing, Dave. I don't think they're going to go all out and keep flipping in between the real world and the sitcom world. I think the next few episodes are primarily going to be sitcom, but like the first 3 episodes, we're going to get bits of surrealism here and there, but we're going to get more, if you know what I mean. So it just keeps building and building and building until I think the final 2 episodes, where it's going to be all, back to the aspect ratio we're all used to, and it's all going crazy. So I think we're going to get more of the same, at least for the next couple of episodes. Straight up sitcoms with a bit of surrealism in there. Right, so that brings us to the end of the episode then. I can't wait to see where this show goes. Plenty of more questions to be answered. But before we get out of here, as we always like to do, let the people listening know where they can catch up with us. So, Dave, what are you doing, and how can the people get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me via the Mind Stone. No. You can catch me on Twitter at David Osgar, that's Osgar. You can also catch me on Letterboxd. And yeah, you can catch me writing stuff for my website, freshtakehub.com, where we also have the review for this week's episode done by the great Niall Glynn, our friend from the Monday Lorians, who will also be doing the 5th episode as well. So go check that out. And yeah, there should be some good stuff dropping on the website very soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Tom, what about you?
Twitter, that's it, basically. At Gapperboy, that's about all I have at the moment. Keep saying I'll set up some more socials. I keep forgetting. But
Twitter's good enough.
Yeah, Twitter's good enough. So you can find me on there. I'm starting to use it more. I might actually start, because I've been tempted to do some other things in my own time, like comic book related, whether I'm doing a podcast or writing up on it. But I'll probably use Twitter as a vehicle for sharing that. So might see some content on there from me soon. But if not, I occasionally post hilarious tweets every couple of months. So you can find me there.
Well, people, if you have some questions that you need answering related to the comics, Tom is your guy. So just hit him up on Twitter. And if you're nice to him, he might reply to you.
I probably will. I don't get a lot of people tweeting me, so it'll be easy to find you. It's oh my god, a Twitter notification. I'm finally popular.
Same. You can also find me on Twitter at SweatyJake, and you can also get all my controversial film opinions on Letterboxd. That's at Jake Hart. The show, though, you can find us on Twitter and on Facebook. We're at Capes, Cows, and Masks, and we're at any place you can listen to podcasts. So that's Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, all of it. We're on all of it, and if you're feeling generous, especially on Apple, rate us, review us, because it all helps get us pushed up in those algorithms. So, until next week, guys, where we will rejoin the weirdness and the kookiness of the world of WandaVision, stay safe and take it easy. Bye, guys.
Bye. WandaVision, WandaVision.
WandaVision.